So now we've done the joinery that's necessary to connect the cabinet sides of the top and bottom. The next thing will be to cut the grooves for the back panel to fit. The top and bottom, because it has these exposed ends, has to be done on the router table. But the sides, because I can make this cut all the way through using the table saw, that's my tool of choice. So I've set the distance between the fence and the tooth of the blade at 3/8 of an inch. I have the height of the cut at about 1/4 of an inch. I haven't bothered to change blade because this cut can be so simply made by making one cut, then I'll move the fence over and I'll cut again. So this is a scrap piece of Baltic birch. It's the exact thickness of the stock that I'll be using to make the back panel. Now with the sides cut, I can go to the router table and route the top and bottom to fit. So to route the top and bottom on the router table, I start my setup by using the piece that I just fitted on the table saw. So I can take it, line it up, and make sure that my spacing here is exactly the same. So that's where I'll make my first setup of the fence. Then I can take my top bottom and I'm going to set up my stop blocks. So I line my piece up here where I can see the cutter in alignment with this biscuit groove. That'll give me my position for the stop block on the left. So I'll clamp that in place. Now to determine the position on the right, I'll move my workpiece over and clamp another stop block in position. And then once again, I'll double check to make sure that I like the way the positions are running. So now I can take my measurements to fit the back panel. Okay, so I have this little maple cabinet trial assembled with a biscuit in place in each position. So I look here, that's 10 1/8. My groove in each side goes 1/4 of an inch deep. So 10 1/8 plus 1/2 is 10 5/8. That tells me how wide I need to cut my back panel. Here, I come up with a measurement 21 1/2, so that gives me a back panel size of 10 5/8 by 22. So I'll simply cut that on the table saw. So now, this cabinet would almost be ready to assemble. There are some things that have to be done to it first. If it needs adjustable shelves, I need to drill some holes for shelf supports to fit. If it's going to have fixed shelves, I'm going to have to route some grooves and make some shelves to fit. I've shown you how to route grooves for the back to fit using a router table. When a cabinet gets much larger than that, the parts become a little more difficult to handle, and in that case you'd want to use a plunge router to do the same thing. So I have a 1/4 inch router bit in the plunge router, and I have the depth cut so that it will drop down 1/4 of an inch. This particular cabinet is put together with dovetails, so I want to center the back panel in the pin. That will determine the distance between the router bit and the fence. I'm leaving a space at the back so the cabinet can be hung with a French cleat. So I begin routing in the space right between dovetails. Now my scrap piece that I'm using to test the fit on the back, I've already made a cut in it along the edge to bring it to the thickness of the router bit cut. So I've marked a start point and a stop point, and now I'm going to route into the dovetailed pins. Okay, now we're down. So now I can put the back panel in. It'll fit tight. It'll get a lot of strength to it. And you can look at the back and there's no visible sign of the cut made to hold the back. Before you assemble a cabinet, you have to make a decision whether you're using fixed or adjustable shelves. Now, because of the size of this cabinet, I want to use adjustable shelves so I have as much flexibility as possible. So I start by making measurements as to where I'm going to drill holes for shelf supports to fit. So I'm going to start down here at about 6 inches, and I'm going to make marks every inch going all the way up. Most shelves require a certain amount of space between them, but to provide increments where they can be moved is very useful in terms of how the shelves are adjusted. And I don't need anything way up there. I've got these two cabinet sides aligned perfectly at the bottom. I'm going to make sure that I have the same marks on both pieces of wood so that the shelves will be level. So now I can take my square away and I can make this mark travel all the way across, or at least where it needs to go. So now I'm ready to drill my holes on the drill press. I'm using a brad point bit because the point is going to be easier to locate exactly on the line. I set the depth so that I'm absolutely certain it doesn't go all the way through the stock. I have the fence set up so that my holes will be drilled 3/4 of an inch from the front edge. So I'll do the left and right sides, the holes for the front. And then I'm going to change the fence location so I'll be able to drill the holes at the back side. The exact distance isn't critical as long as you have enough space there that you can reach and pull the thing out without difficulty. I'll clean it up by using an orbital sander. It'll sand away the pencil marks. It'll also take away all the little fuzzy edges. There are many times when you want to make a cabinet that has fixed shelves. For example, this spice cabinet was made to hold spice jars, and I have to have good clearance to be able to lift the jar in and out. So before I started cutting my first piece of wood, I took into consideration the size of the jar that would go in. So now I want to show you how to install fixed shelves. So I allow for 5 inches before the first shelf. Now, this little jig here I've designed so that this mark right here lines up with the router cut. This is held at 90 degrees, and when I put it tightly on the cabinet sides, I can use it as a guide for routing. So my first mark will actually be at 5 1/4 and 5, and I line my jig up with that mark. Clamp everything in place. So I'm going to mark a stop and start point for the travel of the router. So the router will go route from there to there, stopping, and from there to there, stopping. I put the router base up against the fence. A shelf should fit. Now I want to take a little nibble out of the end so that it'll cover that joint. So I've notched this on the table saw. You could also notch it with a small hand saw, chisel, mallet, any number of ways. This can be either glued in or you can just leave it loose. Doesn't make any difference. So that gives me perfectly matched shelf grooves for fixed shelving.